Alright, I am back with another Destiny 2 video, and it's one of those days where I record a video and then something big immediately happens after, so instead of talking about Iron Banner, which I guess maybe I'll save for tomorrow, I am talking about this big new IGN article that dropped by Rebecca Valentine, who's a very good investigative reporter there. This goes deeper into all of the stuff that's happened just over a month ago with the layoffs and the current situation, which, man, this sounds not great at all. So we know the basics of this. I'm not going to just read the whole article word for word here, but I will go over the highlights. I will put a link in the description. I have tweeted this. Really go read the whole thing. We need reporting like this, and you should support it by clicking on it. So we know the basics of this, where Bungie laid off 100 people out of 1,200 total, and those cuts were significant to many forward-facing areas of the company, but also places like player security and the PvP strike team, a whole bunch of things. They were not handled well. A lot of people are very bitter about the way they went down. And it's not, there's not exactly a sense of coming together to rally after this, which is part of what this article talks about. And then we have the inside reporting that Bungie missed their revenue goals for this year, or is currently missing them by 45%. And previously they said, or they were told that if they had missed by this degree and they were not, purchased by Sony, that the entire company may have collapsed. Well, turns out that could still potentially happen, sort of. The biggest news out of this is a report that the way the Sony deal is structured, like Bungie retains its independence, technically. However, if Bungie does not meet certain revenue goals, Sony has the ability to take over the company, essentially, and dissolve the current board of directors there, and essentially run the place themselves. This is crazy that Bungie could have gotten themselves in this situation. Granted, staying independent also seems like it may not have been viable, but in order to make this deal with Sony, they had to shift over a certain amount of potential responsibility, where if they did not meet those goals, Sony has a lot of leeway to sort of step in and do whatever they want. The one quote here: if Bungie falls short of its revenue goals by too great an amount, Sony is allowed to dissolve the existing board and take full control of the company. So granted, that's how it sort of works with the companies they bought previously, but the whole deal here was Bungie retains its independence. Bungie is still Bungie. They're just, they're owned by Sony technically, but they're doing their own thing. That would change here. And while we don't know exactly what that would mean for Destiny or Marathon or all future Bungie projects, like a while back when this is all going down, I heard that there was some fear that Bungie would just be chopped up into pieces and used as live service support for these other games that Sony's trying to make. And given the current state of things, where Destiny is severely missing these revenue goals and actively losing money, that is not impossible to see happening. And I'll go back to this, but there are just a ton of cost-cutting measures that have gone on at the company. They talk about a hiring freeze, which, not great when you're trying to put out a bunch of new products and you're trying to maintain the consistency of Destiny. We saw them eliminate a number of roles that they had listed after that all went down. Reduced travel budgets, elimination of holiday bonuses. Its Bungie Day is now virtual. They've delayed its pentathlon events. There's no more, or they've reduced a lot of morale events, like to be a much less frequent degree. They're ending benefits like employee compensation adjustments to meet market rates, new hire lunch, employee donation matching, and yearly performance bonuses are capped when they weren't at 80% when they weren't previously. And the mood at Bungie right now is described as soul-crushing. Everyone is extremely nervous about what is currently going on with the company, and no one believes that layoffs are necessarily over. If they continue to not meet these goals, there are probably going to be more layoffs to come. That's the general sense of things. And another quote is, "We really need Final Shape to do well." And I have said previously that I do not think that this is going, not necessarily that the Final Shape won't do well by itself, but if the goal here is Bungie cannot keep missing these revenue targets by such a huge amount, I don't see that reversing. I see it getting worse. I don't know how it could get better in the near term future here. And I'll go over this again, but with a delay for the final shape, which makes the season now 6 months long, uh, by definition, you are going to see a large drop in spending. Like, that has to be the case. You have one season that has been released that costs, X dollars, and a lot of that, keep in mind, a lot of the seasonal spending has already been spent because this is people, a lot of people who bought the $100 edition of, Destiny a while back. So that money was already spent, and that already feeds into the current revenue declines. And even if Lightfall did have a lot of players and I think sold pretty well, after that there's been a severe drop off in the player base more generally. And as we head into this season, like a lot of people have already bought it, and there's only one new slate, of Eververse items that we know about. Like it seems unlikely that they're going to do an entirely new slate of items when 3 months rolls around. I bet they'll try and do some, and they'll do some for holidays. But also there was not something like a 30th anniversary pack coming, which how much was that? Like $30, something like that, 20-30 bucks. They have some sort of Into the Light event, but that seemed the way that was described was like some sort of bridge for new players to like hop into the game before the final shape, which makes no sense because like how many people would jump into the game right before the grand finale event? I know, like, I think Final Fantasy 14 did something like this, but I don't think Destiny is in the same position to try and convince people to do that. Uh, and as such, this does not strike me as an event that's going to be paid. If the last minute they decide it needs to be paid, that's going to be really upsetting for players. Like, I would not put it past them given this, revenue situation. But, and then we lead into the final shape. And we are going to get into the final shape with record low player counts. There is no question in my mind that we are going to see bottomed out player counts by the time the final shape rolls around. Maybe they trickle up at the end as right as we get close to the expansion, but at the end of Season of the Witch, we saw all-time low player counts, at least on Steam, and at least since, Curse of Osiris, when there was not live content. Without question, by the time we're in month 4 or 5 of whatever of this season, player count is going to be very, very low. We will be much lower. Well, not much lower. I don't know how much lower you get after the Season of the Witch numbers, but it will be lower than those. I have no doubt in my mind, no matter what the season's like, the dungeon's great, Coil's fun, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all right now. That's a big problem, is quality doesn't really matter. So those numbers will bottom out. We've already heard the final shape pre-orders are soft. I don't know what could happen over these next 6 months to dramatically increase revenue. Like, this game is monetized to the goddamn hilt. Like, at this point, they've raised seasonal prices. They have a dungeon pass. Like, expansions are expensive. The microtransactions are everywhere. Like, you can buy less stuff for Bright Dust. Like, I don't know what they could possibly do. Like, they could add more stuff. They could raise prices, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't, if people won't bite, if people don't buy it. So we head into the final shape. And again, I've always tried to just assume the final shape is going to be good. I've heard it's good from early testing and whatever, but again, that is one thing. So the final shape can do well, and the expansion can sell well. But because it is the end of this 10-year saga of Destiny, that specific saga, again, I worry about what happens right after that. We are going into this episodic model, which is less seasons per year, that I assume are going to be more expensive to compensate for that. But they're these disconnected stories. It seems like something you could just not really play if you were just looking to kind of drift away from Destiny in general. The final shape as an ending point is a logical place for a lot of people to stop playing the game. So it doesn't feel like, to me, like something maybe like the Witch Queen year. Like, the Witch Queen is a great expansion. Like, it's awesome. We're going to head into the next year like pretty excited about, what's to come over the course of that year. With the final shape being an ending, and who knows what the plan is after the episodes. I still thought they were going to make new expansions, but Lord knows if that's actually going to happen. And then for Bungie as a company, you have this waiting period where you have to get to Marathon, because Marathon is supposed to be this big new launch for them and a big revenue generator as a, no doubt, free-to-play game with microtransactions and battle passes and whatever. But, then that has to be really good. That has to be a financial hit. That has to deliver on revenue as well. And if Bungie is missing this hard in revenue now, and we are heading into this season of a huge delay, a huge player count drop, the end of a saga, which will have a number of people drop off right after that, even if that specific thing does well. I don't know. I don't want to be, doom and gloom here, but if this is news, because it's one thing if Bungie just misses revenue and like Sony's just continuing to float them and they realize it's a long-term investment, blah blah blah. But the trajectory is such where I don't know how they could avoid this situation with further, seeing further revenue losses and then having Sony come in and take over the company. And Sony coming in and taking over the company is kind of a scary prospect because we have no idea what Sony's going to do. Sony is obviously, king of making high-profile single-player games, but then they've been on this recent live service kick, which is already kind of falling apart. They delayed half of their live service games. Others, early reporting is that they're not doing great. Who knows if something like Last of Us Factions is coming out. And then the one live service thing they bought and spent $3.6 billion on is actively disintegrating and doing these huge revenue losses. And they thought that this was going to be sort of a guaranteed money printer, and it's not. It is definitely not that. And it's potentially so bad that they may have to just take over the company and try to figure out a way to turn it around. I don't know how Sony would turn it around. Like, I don't think Sony's going to have some magic fix to like make, Destiny profitable again. And if Destiny and Bungie's other games are not profitable, then what happens to Bungie? It gets broken up and, it just doesn't exist anymore, essentially. And it's a situation where they got too far over their skis, where they developed a game that is very, very expensive to make. They put almost all of their time into that for a very long time now, but then they siphoned off a bunch of people from that game, which in some ways made Destiny worse because certain aspects, PvP, Gambit, whatever, got less of a focus, and moved all these people to Marathon. But Marathon is still very far away, years away, potentially, at least a year and a half, 2 years at baseline. And so now they're stuck with this game that is very expensive, that is actively losing money because players are disillusioned with it, and then trying to get to this road to the next game. And it's unclear if that can automatically succeed. I think it has a better chance than most because Bungie is good at developing shooters, but it's a ridiculously crowded competitive space in the free-to-play multiplayer shooter market, and the idea of a AAA extraction shooter is very new. Like, there's only a couple real extraction shooters on the market, and we already heard that like this is not going to be like Tarkov, so is there a market for this? Who knows? This is not good. This is pretty scary. And if I was at Bungie, I understand the whole, morale is really, really low right now. And guess what? Low morale does not produce really good products. And I don't know exactly what should have happened here. It seems like this is a result of a lot of long-term poor decisions by Bungie management. Bungie management, which has not at all really kind of paid the price for this, although they may be about to. If Sony steps in and cleans house and takes over the board and does all this stuff, you may see all of these high-profile people that may be responsible for a lot of these things either not having power or not working there anymore. So I don't know. Like, as a fan of Bungie, of Destiny, as looking forward to Marathon to a certain extent, like, this sucks. Like, I wish they were not in this situation, and I report on the game's issues all the time, and I have my own complaints and this and that. But like, fundamentally, I want the game to succeed. I think a lot of us want the game to succeed, but it is not succeeding. And the period of time we are about to head into is solely relying on the final shape being a good expansion, and it's kind of ignoring everything else around it with this giant dead zone of space that's about to happen in the next 6 months, and then what happens after the final shape with the switch to episodic model, which I don't, I get people are sick of seasons, but it's just like a variant of seasons, and it's taking place after this big finale, so that is another thing that I think should be concerning. I don't know. I read this like 20 minutes ago, so I'm still processing it a little bit, but this is like, 5-alarm fire time, kind of, and we don't owe it to Bungie to just buy a bunch of microtransactions. Like, that's not really on us, and it's, on the company to produce something people want to play and people want to spend money on, which has been increasingly tough these days. I will continue to talk about things I like and things I don't like. I like Coil. I like the dungeon. I think they've done a really good job with seasonal stuff in the last 2 seasons, but again, that's another crazy issue, is that doesn't matter. The quality of the last 2 seasons has not really factored into this. So that's why I'm wondering if the quality of the final shape also matters, because after Lightfall, if people are just disillusioned with the game, and after 6 months of not playing, they're not really psyched up for the final expansion, what's that going to do? You would have to launch, be good, and then people might start buying it. But I don't know why pre-orders would suddenly pick up over the next 6 months in some crazy significant degree that is driving so much revenue. But this is very concerning. This is the most concerning thing I think I've read about this. Even with my own reporting, even hearing about how bad things have been inside, I did not know about this idea that Sony could just dissolve the board and take over the company. And it is possible that's better given some of the decisions Bungie leadership has made, but I don't really trust Sony to actively run a live service game terribly well. So we'll see what actually happens with that. So yeah, thanks for watching. We'll keep an eye on this, and good lord, not great. Okay, talk to you later.